This is Visions Under Construction, a chance for our guests to share their visions and tell us what they're working on. For their continued support, we would like to thank Simwood, straight-talking, forward-thinking telecoms. Simwood.com. Why not make Cloudonics your communication partner? Go to cloudonics.io. You can find everything about the VUC at vuc.me, thanks to Bluehost, and thanks also to zipdx.com, the conference bridge, and to voxphone.com for local rate dial-ins. And here's a last-minute scoop. Yes, ComCon. James will tell us about that in a moment, but first I want to introduce our guest, who needs no introduction, Mr. Olle Johansson.
Thank you, Randy. It's an honor to be here, finally.
Olle, it's been too long since I've seen you. That is to say, something like 6 days.
I fully agree. I fully agree.
I want to take a vote. Would the community agree? Would the honorable gentleman, please, if you have never listened to the BBC, would you all agree that Olle is one of the finest presenters with the best slides ever?
Yep. Yeah, suppose so.
Yeah, well, other than James.
You want enthusiasm as well?
Other James,
yes, he
James
is.
Corrado, Michael, and Andy.
It was wonderful to see Olle back on form at Kamailio World last week. It was brilliant.
It was.
Thank you.
Olle, even though you need no introduction, we've been having a little bit of a discussion here, not an argument per se, but let's say a difference of opinion about Astricon. You were an original contributor to the SIP channel. In fact, I dare say one of the major contributors, right? Channel SIP, I should say.
Yeah.
Right?
For a long time. I spent too many years in that code.
Too many years in that cage, that cold, dark room where you did nothing but code and had no thanks for it at all.
I had thanks.
But what is the exact origin of Astricon? Not to bring up painful memories, but you were actually one of the originators or co-originator.
If I had known about this question, I could have brought up some really cool pictures from the Origins. The Origins was actually the Voice on the Net conference organized by Jeff Pulver, where I met Mark Spencer and the gang for the first time. And a gentleman named Steven Sokol. And we walked around there and sat in the conference. And suddenly in one of the panels, Jeff Pulver pointed at us and said, watch out for these guys because they're working with Asterisk and they're going to make a revolution and you won't know what's going to hit you. And after a few days walking around, mostly being on business talks, business, we said that, well, we can do this much, much better. So we came up with the idea on Astricon, Steven and I together. And the name, I think, Steven came up with, to be honest. But I've been organizing a lot of conferences before. So together we said, well, let's do something. And we talked with Mark, and Mark said that, yeah, I mean, of course I can support that, no problem. Because he believed that, well, could we get 10 people in a room, that would be a great hit. And we got over 500.
Yeah, just where was the first one?
In Atlanta, Georgia. It was a hotel that, luckily for us, confirmed every single booking they got. So they got overbooked like crazy. And they tried telling us the night before Astricon that, we're sorry, we just can't host all these people. And we said, well, it's not our problem. You confirmed everything legally, so fix it. So they booked rooms in 1 or 2 other hotels and organized buses and everything.
Let's go around the table. I'm afraid Corrado's probably never been. Corrado, you've never been to an Astricon, right? Because it's a long way to go.
Not.
Andy, how many have you been to? Yeah, I know you've been to at least 1 or 2.
I've been to 2. I would like to have gone to more, but unable to do so since then.
James, 3 or 4?
I can't remember. It's a large number. But I remember the very first time I met Olle in Madrid.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that? But before Astricons, I went to the Von shows as well, which is where I met lots and lots of interesting people. Like
I have some interesting memories about a butcher somewhere.
Well, that was after an Astricon, was it? We went on a bit of a road trip round, didn't we, in a hire car, Olle?
Yeah.
And then we had multiple birthday meals.
Exactly, and we went to Fry's or something.
We did all kinds of outrageous things. But anyway, let's not talk about that.
Well, wait a minute. I want to finish the notion, which is, Michael, you've been to, I know 1, but maybe 2 or more?
Two. Denver and Phoenix.
Phoenix, Denver and Phoenix.
Yeah, in fact, that's where I met you for the first time, Michael, in Denver, in the something or other room where you were fiddling with lots of Polycom phones.
Yeah, we were having a little meetup kind of thing going on over there. Yeah.
Yes, I remember that.
Just to complete the old Zhang Zine thing, I think, Olle, you and I met first at a MUCON. Possibly.
Yeah, in Rostock, or where was it?
First one was Berlin.
Berlin. Okay.
Berlin.
Yeah, we met in the hotel just outside.
Yeah,
I remember.
Great. And I remember, I'm not going to go on down memory lane that much, but I just want to mention one thing that I thought was really funny and that people missed if they weren't there. And I don't know which one this was, which Astricon this was, but you and I were being the shills for 2 different tracks, right? And so you were running down the hall going, be sure to see such and such thing. And I would alternate with my spiel.
Yep.
2 separate tracks that were concurrent. That was a lot of fun. Just shows what kind of fun you're having. And just as a transition, before we continue with Olle, James, wake up. We've fantastic news today because I will be coming to ComCon if I get.
Go on.
So now, James, you have to give us 1 minute.
Okay, the background.
Without hesitation, deviation, or what's the third thing?
You've forgotten. Anyway,
repetition.
This is Randy explaining why his talk for ComCon didn't make the cut.
Because it sucked.
It could have been a little bit better, I fear. But anyway, the quality of the speakers at ComCon is going to be so superb.
Oh, so
not even Mr. Randy Resnick made the cut. So that's an indication of how stellar things are.
Also, off topic, if I can defend myself.
Yeah, you were totally off topic. So totally random. Bit like
I think that's half of it. Half of it is that you're going to be locked up in a remote place, staying together all days.
With no females.
And that's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of tech talks, and probably some Sipsmith as well. But
no females.
I'm anxiously waiting for the output of all that. What's going to happen if you take a lot of real-time gurus and techies and developers and lock them in for a week?
Well, it's going to be interesting to find out. By the way, we'll lock people in with a 4G phone system, which they can play with and do nasty things to.
Oh. Exactly.
So that'll be fun. Anyway,
that's a breeding ground for a singularity, guys.
Yeah, coming back to the story of how Randy is now going to ComCon, one of our good friends, Mr. Rob Pickering, who we're hoping to have on at some stage, probably not today, but next week, decided that he was going to sponsor 4 people to go to ComCon, covering the costs of the ticket, which is all inclusive. And I'm very pleased to report that one of those 4 tickets has been awarded to Mr. Randy Resnick. So Randy shall go to the ball after all. But what I want to know is who the other 3 are. So hopefully we can get Rob on and explain who the lucky people are and why they're going.
Thank you, Ole. Ole, Chansip, pretty much big percentage of stuff that you wrote. What else did you do with Asterisk before moving on to other things? Anything?
Oh, I mean, the most important part was, apart from code, was starting all the documentation efforts by filling in VoIP info. By doing that documentation in parallel with Leif and Jared when they started writing the books, we actually fixed a lot of problems and documented a lot of stuff that wasn't documented. Then Steve and I, we made Asterisk really a business alternative by setting up the trainings, the conferences, setting up the certification. We did a lot of things that is needed apart from actual code in order to have a successful project.
Yeah.
So we actually really pushed on Asterisk into a market-ready product.
So, Olle, were you the person who originally set up the DCAP program? Were you DCAP number one?
I wasn't DCAP number one because I wrote most of the questions.
But who was DCAP number one?
I was a group of people, I would say.
All at the same time.
I just remember our scare when during some of the one of the Astricons that Mark Spencer wanted to go up for DCAP because DCAP covered all of Asterisk, and many of the old gurus, they know Asterisk and H323 and Asterisk and ISDN, but didn't know all of it, right? So we were really, really scared with those people. The old Asterisk gang came up and wanted DCAPs, but somehow they made it.
James, I don't know if you're clipping your nails or what, but you keep there's a snipping noise. And hello, Keith. There's a noise that you're making that keeps stealing the focus. Ole, I just want to mention, and to all of our thousands and hundreds of millions of listeners here today, that the only reason I'm even involved in this at all, I've mentioned Free World Dial-Up, so yeah, we used it and we met there, a bunch of people. I saw James Bodie's name, I may have seen your name, but I got involved in the documentation program myself with Life and their very first book. And the reason I did is because, by God, open source documentation sucks usually. Yep. And it is so bad and so awful and so horrible that you really need people who know nothing about the topic. And so I put together my little Asterisk rig. And as it happens, Mark has a nexus with France through his parents. So he was in Paris for that reason. And he...
Almost every Christmas, right?
Yeah, and he called... Yeah, right. They come every year, and they have a place here. But the point is that he got on IRC. I was on the Asterisk channel on IRC, and he got on and was saying, okay, I'm in Paris and let's meet. And so I went to that, and there was about, I don't know, between 5 and 10 people there. And we started a little Asterisk in Paris thing and everything. And at that point, then the podcast, which was, as everybody knows, originally the Asterisk Users Conference 2007. Hello. And so that's why I'm even here today, knowing all you guys, the great folks. But the documentation is an effort that, I put a lot into, and I'm really amused thinking back, because somebody said, well, you can't have two cards. Thank you, Corrado. You can't have two. Oh God, what are the two cards? The FXO and
FXS.
Yeah, FXS and FXO thing. So you can't have two FXOs and one FXS. Well, I put together a crap 386 probably machine that had two FXOs and one FXS. And that was the year that the FXS came out. So I had three non-interrupt or IRQ, whatever they are, back in the day, and I had Slack OS, right? Oh, you talk about anyway. I just want.
How do we get onto that prehistoric stuff?
This is part of the history, and it's Olle, and
yeah. Well, that's probably a really good segue to come on to some of the more modern stuff, isn't it? Which is probably what everybody wants to learn about, rather than the FSX stuff of about 1903.
That was about the turn of the century, and I'm not talking about the last century. But this is about Olle, too. So your presentation mentioned an acronym that I'm not even familiar with, Olle. What was it again? IMQ, IRQ?
MQTT.
Oh, God.
MQTT.
And why do we care about that, Olle?
I care.
Care as much, but when looking into what they're doing in IoT, they're on the first level that we were when we started with Asterisk and all this in the VoIP business.
I'm looking MQTT. Somebody could get
Yeah, it's coming. Coming.
In some cases, very, very small amounts of data. In some cases, large amounts of data. And doing it in a secure way. Right now, the business model is more like, I would say, NSA in the telephony business. Someone is stealing all your data and making money of it. And I don't think that's a good business model. But we still have the problem of carrying data with integrity, especially these GDPR days, and privacy between point A and point B. And there are many protocols that can do that, including good old SIP. MQTT is one that is right now currently favored by IoT developers because it's a very, very simple protocol.
Yeah, very simple, very lightweight.
Very, very lightweight. And it carries data, binary blobs from A to B, and from A to B, C, D, E. Many people can subscribe to the same data. Now, I've been spending time trying to figure out how to secure this. The MQTT specs doesn't really help. And put some layer of authentication around it. But doing that, you actually do things that will work equally well in any other protocol, like AMQP, like CoAP that IETF has managed to set up. But the problem when you start playing around with this is that you spend a lot of time on various websites, clicking, then using your credit card, and stuff gets home in small boxes. I have plenty of Arduinos and small things.
Lots of small boxes. Small
boxes. Raspberry Pis by the hundreds and other things, and you start playing with them. And as an old guy in this business, when people tell you that you haven't got enough CPU for encryption, you haven't got enough CPU for TCP sockets, you haven't got enough...
I'm sorry, I have to laugh. That's so funny. That's just so funny. Thank you.
What?
You don't have enough CPU. My goodness.
Yeah,
we've been doing that our entire lives.
Yeah, and every time they've said that in the past, we just wait a few months and Moore's law will help us with more CPU. And now they have to actually come out with the truth saying we don't understand or we don't care about security. But in this area, when you go to very small sensors, Moore's law is sidetracked by Mrs. Moore. Mrs. Moore is a law and a lady we don't really know yet because we don't know the development of batteries. The problem here is power, not really CPU. We have the CPUs and those are cheap. But getting stuff
very cheap. This is probably a good segue to start flashing little devices like this. These are about $10. And this one comes with 2 Ethernet ports and you can run Open WRT on it. And it's just...
That's a fairly big device when you're talking about these devices.
Yeah, they're disposable, aren't they? The cost of them is so low now.
This is stuff you want to build in the concrete when you build bridges. You want to put in the street for parking lots. And when you do that, you want them to stay there for 5 or 10 years without having to do any battery replacement every second week or stuff like that. You just need to work forever.
Which, of course, you can do with the new 5G IoT stuff. I mean, it's designed to produce devices that cost $5 with a battery life of about 10 years. And the most expensive component in the thing is the battery.
You know, now you're speaking about long-haul backend networks, and there's a lot of competition there. You have the private standard Sigfox that goes long range. You have LoRaWAN that have a bit of a feeling of the open guys. And you have the carriers who wants to get in there with selling subscriptions. Telia in Sweden just launched some 4G IoT network thingy here in Sweden.
But Olle, there's no reason why the open source crew can't get in on the same waveforms and do the same stuff as the carriers, is there?
I'm beginning to learn that from you, yes.
Yeah.
I need to study what you're doing.
And a lot of the carrier stuff, I mean, the IoT narrowband and IoT M2, is pretty good stuff. It's really advanced. And because the devices are going to be produced in such massive, enormous quantities, the unit cost is going to be extremely low. So
well, the problem is I don't trust either of us, you or me, because
well, what do you trust?
The people who actually build the devices that's going to be out there, the sensors, they're going to look at your network or the ones I'm looking at saying, too much energy, we're sorry, we're going to use this little thingy short haul on this waveform we fixed ourselves.
Yeah, but then
I'm one of those that will need open standards.
Well, you're right, and then you use a little gateway like that.
And I need
that's a gateway between your really super low power stuff and the rest of the world. And these, by the way,
how is all this stuff powered? Is it battery or is it solar?
Well, it can be anything, really.
But what is it?
Most of it is a combination. You have batteries. I mean, I've been working with SIP for alarm systems, setting up stuff indoors for getting voice in and out of the building. And in the box, you have a battery. You have a small, low-powered radio that just goes to the main hub in the house. And the calculation for that is that when they mount something in your building, it has to be able to stay without changing batteries for at least 6 years. So, like every SIP engineer, when we started working with this, I said, well, you know, this is a security device. I can place a call every night to make sure it works. And they just looked at me, then put some figures into Excel and said, you're going to drain the battery in 6 months. You're not going to call every night. You may call once a year.
Yeah. Then you've got other devices which have no batteries at all. So, for example, these days you can buy light switches which generate enough energy by pushing the button to send the signal. So they don't need batteries. They just have a capacitor.
I mean, it's in every store, the Philips Hue light switch.
Yeah,
we have one in the house.
So that's like a piezo approach to power generation. Has anybody used in this realm sort of like an inductive charging mechanism, so that you have something where even though the sensor is built into a device, you might periodically come along and re-up it from distance? Well,
there are those devices. Some of the mobile credit cardy type devices use exactly that means. So the credit card is powered from the reader.
Yeah, so RFID stuff.
Yeah, RFID stuff.
Right, which is our RFID, but that's kind of a case in point. But you still have maybe some kind of supercapacitor or battery.
A lot of research in getting, I mean, some sort of energy out from radio waves.
Yeah, we are surrounded by radio waves of different power and different energy. There are even the Wi-Fi you have in your house is transmitted constantly. You don't need to latch onto that, but you can just harvest the energy, the milliwatts or microwatts that your router is sending out the packets, and use it to recharge the batteries of the things inside your house.
Yeah. And my friends that was involved in some European Union project around that said that the military bands are really, really good. A lot of power.
Yep. Radars, and other things around, especially here in Scotland. There's quite a few of them that beam across, and you can harvest good energy from that.
Yeah. So things will happen. I mean, this is where a lot of innovation is put in, a lot of work is put in, is just batteries.
Yeah.
Everyone speaks about batteries for the cars, but I think this field is equally interesting.
Not forgetting that if you have anything that is static, it can be connected to anything. If it's in a building, can be connected to a solar panel, a small solar panel, or a small tile outside the house that could just harvest enough energy to power
Yeah,
it.
I showed pictures of that at Kamailio World, my experiment last summer that I'm going to start with. Just suddenly I got a solar panel in the mail, and then I had to get the car battery and a Raspberry Pi and some hats to the Raspberry Pi so I could monitor the solar panel and the battery. And the Raspberry Pi unfortunately drained the battery, so I'm going to have to switch to Arduinos. But there are interesting things to learn in all this.
If you look at the technology of drones, you can buy a drone for $60 now or $100, and
you can tear it apart and you get a lot of good stuff in there.
But that's what I'm saying, is there's an enormous amount of technology packed into that. And then you look at IoT, and you got your light bulbs and all your crap that's around the house, and it's not really put together in a logical way yet. So I think people are kind of fumbling around trying to get hubs and so on. But yeah. I'm going to give you my vision, and then we're going to go over to you, Olle, for your vision. But my vision is that someday, probably after I'm gone, someone is going to come up with a system that has all this stuff designed together, so that whatever you want to put in your house, it's going to be a part of this ensemble. In other words, you've got to have battery. Everything's got to have power, right? So there's got to be some standard power thing in there. I mean, obviously,
we do have standard power. So things like these, lithium batteries. So I bought these at the local pound store, 8 for £1, and then they power things like little buttons like that, and then buttons like that.
But you want one. This is part of my point, which is that you don't want 50,000 different batteries of different voltages that you have to go to the special guy who, on the weird street who only has, every possible battery. Because
that's one problem. But if we go back to our history, our common shared history, right? When we started, Asterisk was a big thing because we had 6 skinny protocols from Cisco. We had Nortel IP telephony protocols. We had a big mess, and analog lines, E1s, T1s, ISDN. We needed multi-protocol to fit the system together and to make it possible for people to call each other across all these barriers.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing happens here. We have Z-Wave, we have 433, we have Zigbee, we have Thread, Open Thread, we have all kinds of stuff. And if you look at the open source, I would say, marketplace here, there's some interesting pieces of software coming up that try to bridge everything in the way we did with Asterisk. I'm using something called Domotics, which is an open source software you put in a Raspberry Pi, and you start experimenting, and suddenly you figure out that you lost control of your house because Domotics runs everything. You can build an alarm system very easily with that. You can build control over the lights behind your TV. You can start having themes. So you turn on romantic, you turn on dinner, you turn on cleaning, full power on every light you have. But there's a lot of islands that are isolated, and there are people struggling to put them together, but it's not for the average user to do. So either you lock yourself into a single vendor solution like Philips Hue or IKEA or something else, or you try to sort it out yourself. And this got to change. There's got to be open interfaces between all of these and some sort of standard.
I would like to put Keith on the spot here for a second and ask him, but I'll ask all of you, but let him respond first because I think he knows about this. Keith, do you think that SIP is the new MIDI? In other words, Keith probably knows about MIDI.
I do.
MIDI's kind of, I mean, is MIDI still a thing and is SIP still a thing?
I have a box of MIDI cables down there, actually.
Yeah, I mean, for those who don't know, MIDI is Musical Instrument Digital Interface, and it was a revolutionary thing which happened about 83, I think, which enabled synthesizers to be digitally connected in a way that you could, another musical instrument, in a way that you could use one basically to control another, and you could then do things like record effectively key presses of a synthesizer and then play them back and do all kinds of really clever things. And it kind of, it's what's driven the modern development of synthesizers for the last probably 30 years or so. And it's still a modern standard, and it still exists today, not in the form that you would expect, or not in the form it was released in. The original form had these big, clunky, low-speed DIN connectors that you used to have to connect to everything and wire everything up. These days, when you buy, I'm looking at a piece of equipment I've got here. This is actually a guitar, it's a tabletop guitar effects processor. And you plug your guitar in there, and you can program it to make all kinds of sounds. But this has MIDI, and the MIDI comes through the USB, and it does things like pick up the guitar sound and translate that into a MIDI note, so you can actually drive a synthesizer from your guitar. And you can do things like all of the controls on this, you can actually control via MIDI. So you could actually...
Here's the actual MIDI. Well,
there you go. Yeah, that's the proper MIDI.
But
so MIDI these days is actually very, very common. It's just kind of hidden away inside the guts of things. Like my mixer there is MIDI controlled.
And it's been used for controlling mixers, but also it's been used for controlling the lighting effects.
Yeah, not so much. I mean, the DMXs tends to be used for that.
Yeah.
But my question is, that was part of the question, but the other question is there a similarity with SIP, which is session?
I don't think so, because DMX and MIDI, which I consider to be the kind of the sort of sound and lighting equivalents, are both kind of fairly low level basic things. I'd say they're more similar to MQTT than anything else. But the trouble is with standards is that everyone's jumped on them. There's so many
versions.
Exactly. I mean, there have been standards for this for years. UPnP was originally a standard for home automation. No one uses it, but it's a perfectly adequate standard for doing that. There are UPnP commands to turn on and off light bulbs. There are UPnP commands to turn your music on in different rooms. There's all kinds of stuff like that, and it's an extensible framework, but people don't use it. There's been XAP, there's been XPL, there's now MQTT. And MQTT itself is, as I understand it, I'm not an expert on MQTT, but it itself is kind of more of a framework for low-speed transport of messages rather than necessarily defining what those messages mean. Exactly. So you've then got which UPnP and XAP and XPL did do that. So you've got all these environments which described how to turn the light on and turn the light off. MQTT doesn't do that. It just gives you a transport mechanism for messages, and then what's in those messages is vendor specific. So I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel really for that point of view, because we've already got stuff, but no one's using it. No one agrees on it. I don't see that's
customers. That's the problem. Customers have stopped requiring interoperability, right? They're so used to vendor lock-ins, and I agree with you. MQTT is just the transport. It's like TCP or anything. You have an address and you publish data. You still need an agreement on the data, right? And that's where
MQTT is like RS-485 for the modern world. Yeah. I'll mention RS-485, by the way. It's an old serial line protocol which I actually use for some of my home automation. It's very old, but it still works very well. And there's a lot of older home automation, as particularly alarm system equipment, uses RS-485 because it's like RS-232, but it's a shared bus approach.
Yeah.
It's quite good.
Keith, you're going to have to do a VUC just to describe all the toys and kit that you've got lying around your house.
A lot of mine's quite old.
Great idea.
and just explain what you've got and why you've got it.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people would appreciate that. And you got me to buy one of those Behringer mixing desks, which is probably one of the best things I ever bought. It's
They
brilliant.
are, aren't they? They're very cool, and they're MIDI controlled. They're MIDI controllable. So, but I mean, there's all kinds of. The trouble is, we've got all these different standards, and I think what's happened is that they're only really coming together at the application layer. So you've got things like Domotics and Mr. House, and now what's happening is you're getting these frameworks like Apple's HomeKit and the Google stuff, which really is just gluing stuff together at the application layer, because at the protocol layer it doesn't interoperate, and I just don't see it ever will, because every time you come up with a standard like Z-Wave, you'll get Zigbee coming along to compete with it, and
I like the way you say that, by the way, Z-Wave. Just for the colonials out there, Z-Wave.
Z-Wave.
Z-Wave. We like that.
Can we have a moment of silence? Not really silence, but just a moment of respect for whoever started the idea that you could send things via a single bit transition. So you've got, for example, RS-232, which was used for printers, and I don't know what else, a lot of things. Serial. The serial interface, isn't that amazing? I mean, I still look back and go, who thought of this stuff?
Yeah,
we call it USB nowadays.
What was that?
We call it USB nowadays,
or FireWire, or Lightning, or even internally in CPU architectures, multi-core CPUs now use serial, very high speed serial connections to integrate to synchronize with each other.
But
PCI bus.
Well, we were just talking about RS-232 and before. I mean, MIDI. Sorry, MIDI is serial, isn't it, as well?
It is. Yeah, it's like 32 kilobits per second or something.
Yeah. So I mean,
there is a common trend, and that is we start with parallel connections. The technology improves, and we move to serial connections. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about SCSI transition over the years to serial SCSI architecture, or parallel printer cables to USB, or what have you.
Ethernet.
Yeah.
And let's not forget disks that are moved to serial ATA.
Yeah.
So
how old do you think RS-232 is? When do you think it was introduced? Because I know I've got the answer here in front of me.
My guess would be in the 50s.
Yes, so would mine.
Yeah.
No, actually 1960. It's not
Quite late. Okay.
But it's about as old as me, really. Almost.
When I started in this business, I had a small card, pocket-sized card in my wallet with all the pinouts for the 25-pin and 9-pin RS-232.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I've got
needed that.
I've got
And
a bunch of
Astricon.
breakout boxes that you plug in line with a 25-way RS-232, and it shows you all the lights. And I have one where you can actually re-jumper all the connections.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Over time, that interface actually got simpler and simpler.
Yeah, well, people realise you didn't need all the signals. Yeah. I one of the things I did in the early part of my career was actually put in RS-232 64K RS-232 connections between places in the City of London who are using it for data transfer between mainframes.
Funny, just the memory of RS-232. I remember I bought my first printer was an MX-80. I'm sure I'm not alone, because that was that was it back in the day. By the way, I want to remind folks that those days, I remember I paid $599, $600 for the MX-80.
And a dot matrix printer, 9-pin.
Printer that it was slow as hell. Did not even include a cable for $600. $600 in 1979. I don't even want to think about it. But the point is that gave me the idea that serial was too slow, because that was the daisy chain, the daisy wheel printers were always RS-232. Anyway,
we got back onto old stuff.
Just to say that this is interesting to follow this, James. I know you're not young, so you object to going back too far in your past.
No, I live for the future. not for the past.
Anyway,
What we can do going forward that's sexy and exciting.
Corrado's showing something. Let's
Who remembers this?
Oh, the AUI. The AUI.
Right.
Yeah, that's a printer.
Parallel printer.
Oh, no. Sorry, yeah. No, parallel, yeah.
I got.
I remember Ethernet connectors used to be AUI connectors as well, which look similar to that.
Okay, are we going to play the game of who can find the oldest and most outrageous connector? Because I think I'll probably win.
Well, you got something from the military, I guess.
I've got a big, wide, scuzzy external connector somewhere.
Does anyone remember the Devil's Tooth?
Scuzzy 1, Keith?
Yes.
That you may have something there.
It's an old, off of an old Sun workstation.
I actually worked on those. Although I think they may have had SCSI too.
I have somewhere a 200-pin edge connector from a Ptarmigan military switch.
Yeah, I guessed. I won.
Yeah.
Well, these things are about that big, and they were not good, really. 200 pins. Any one bad pin could stop you from working. This is why serial with much reduced pin out is so much better, because there's less to go wrong, isn't there?
And also, you can do things like put it over fiber optic.
You can indeed. Yeah.
I remember the probably about 93 when I worked for Colt, and we were buying a switch, like a proper old TDM voice switch. And we had the choice. Unfortunately, we made the wrong choice in my view. But we had a choice between a Nortel DMS 100 or a System X. And the System X at that time had just refreshed its technology, and they could squeeze what Nortel were building in something like about 30 racks into about 3 racks, simply because they had this very, very high density switch backplane, which for TDM was kind of revolutionary. It was like a 27-layer back PCB, and then everything else was connected to it by fiber optic. And whereas the Nortel at the time was basically a piece of kit that they had to hand wire on premises, which took half a year.
Yeah. There again, we're airing back onto the old stuff, but I must tell you about the Ptarmigan switches used to have 100 meg Winchester drum in them. And one of the last things I did before taking Ptarmigan out of service is to replace those drives, those drum drives, with a little USB device, plus half a hundredweight of concrete. Because the problem is, you took this big thing out, and the whole vehicle went like that. So you had to put in a load of concrete, and it was really quite strange, because when you powered the thing up, it used to go. You had these big circuit breakers used to go clonk, and all the lights go dim as this thing is spun up. But then after that, you just flick the switch and it just come on. It was nowhere near as dramatic. Anyway.
So basically you ruined everyone's fun.
Yeah, it used to look really, really, really good. And after that, it didn't. But I have to say, your batteries used to last a lot longer.
Ole, check this out, my friend. Look, there is a PoE hat. It's not available from the Raspberry Pi people, but there's a third-party PoE hat available.
I see that there is a few.
Okay. This one does not involve the looping of a little cable outside to another RJ connector, which the first one I saw did.
Okay, so Olle, we're going to put you in the spotlight now for your vision.
My vision.
What's the next thing that you're interested in? What would you like to do? What would you like to see? Do you want to make voice assisted phone calls? What do you want to do? What do you want to work on? Radio, SIP, something undefined, MTQQ, MQTT, whatever it is.
Artificial intelligence.
OTA, AI. My contention is that there is no artificial intelligence. There is machine learning, but I don't see anything that can do any intelligent thing that I see people do during the.
Well, you need to get out more, Randy.
Well, give me an example then, but let's get back to Olle. Any inclinations towards where you're going to be in 5 years, for example, or 2 years, or 1 year?
I have no idea. playing around with this IoT stuff because I believe that we've been spending years sending 8 or 16,000 samples per second across a global network. We can do a lot with IoT, and they're making the same mistakes we did 15 years ago.
Tim said that as well, by the way.
Yeah, and we are in an interesting time because SIP that I've been living with is over 15 years, and now we have WebRTC, and WebRTC have no signaling protocol. So people are building their own protocols, and they're not at all interested in federation. And I'm very, very interested in federation. Problem was that with email, which is an open federation, we get a lot of spam, and people didn't want to repeat that. So I think we need to take a look at identities and trust and ways to build a federation in a globally scalable way.
Here comes the segue to blockchain.
Yeah. And that's a very interesting topic if you also throw in GDPR and privacy and integrity into the mix, right? So who are you? Who am I? I want to be multiple persons. I'm one person with you guys. I'm one person while being a consultant, one person when being a startup advisor. I'm another person with my wife. Why do I have to have a single identity on the net? That's just stupid. So there are interesting things ahead, but I have, as always, I had no clue that I was gonna end up in, I mean, IP real-time communication when I started this stuff. But that's where I've been.
So no next thing in view.
I haven't decided, but as you hear, I'm fiddling around with a lot of different things. I feel I've done my part in the VoIP world.
That's certainly true with no argument.
Well, that's right. We're after doing it for kind of like 15 years, you kind of really want to move on and do something else, don't you?
I don't know, but I've never been this long in one area.
But the other useful thing is that I think you mentioned it in Berlin. A lot of the problems that are coming up in the IoT world are very similar to the problems that we faced and solved in the VoIP world. So a lot of stuff that's built into Kamailio could be used to solve some of the IoT problems.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the software people are building, they're now facing the scalability problem, which we've done in Kamailio for a long time. Kamailio is a extremely well-built protocol engine, high-capacity protocol engine. We can handle many connections. We can handle a lot of messages sent around and routed. We just need another way of routing messages. And while waking up and starting to look at these things and looking back and seeing what Daniel has been up to, there are some interesting things in the event buses and no-SIP modules and other things that has been added to Kamailio recently. I think someone is playing around with doing stuff, routing stuff that is not really SIP alongside with SIP. But in Kamailio, we've been handling state changes, we've been handling presence. There's a lot of good stuff in there. And I'm not ready to kill the SIP protocol yet. The big problem we have, if we want to bring that forward, is really security. When they wrote RFCs, I think there was no implementation. There was very little experience in TLS and security. Again, because they didn't have the CPUs. So
I actually think it's beyond that. I think it's the same with SMTP and a lot of the other protocols. I think it was a naivety, and those protocols were developed in an internet which was naive and didn't have a lot of bad actors in. And then when it became more open and people started attacking it, then they suddenly went, "Ooh, these protocols aren't really fit for purpose because they haven't got the inbuilt security and etc. in them."
No, and because of that, we're in a bit of a jam, because I mean, email, Jabber, SIP, MQTT, we're all shipping messages. We're all shipping binary blocks from A to B, right? And we have the same problem with security. We've been trying with PGP and SMIME and a few others. It hasn't really scaled and hasn't taken off, and we need to figure out why, because we share the problem. And because that we haven't got any federated, globally distributed system like that, a lot of my business partners are now signing up for web services where they deliver a secure message, and I have to check in and retrieve my secure message from a company I have no clue of, from a system I can't review, I can't do a security audit, I have no way what the hell they're doing, but they're storing a lot of personal data about me, who sends me messages, and that's critical. And that's turning into a problem. So there is some work to do here. And fortunately, there are some people spearheading stuff here. Our friends at Matrix and Wire and Signal are doing a lot of cool stuff.
Yes, which is probably a good reminder that we probably do need to get Matthew and Amandine back on to, because the world of Matrix is moving so quickly at the moment.
Yeah,
they got a big deal with the French state and probably some funding as well. And now people are starting to talk. I've been talking about Matrix for a long time with many customers, and suddenly many of them are interested at once. But they still don't get it. They look at the iPad app. They look at the web interface. But the really cool thing is the secure messaging infrastructure and applying double ratchet encryption to all of that.
Unfortunately, the most of the product development is pushed forward by people who don't necessarily understand technology and just look at things that are shiny.
Yeah, I've been involved in a very confused project like that.
Here's an interesting little fact for you. All of the videos from Kamailio World 2018 are up on the web, and the quality is extraordinarily good. But it's interesting to see which videos have had the most views. And can you guess which one is the most viewed talk or session? If I told you
was it the one on fuzzing Kamailio?
No, it wasn't, strangely enough. The second most popular, bizarrely enough, and I can't think why, it was actually the dangerous demo session.
Oh.
But I can't think why that should be.
Oh, really?
But the most popular one, bizarrely enough, was Kamailio with Docker.
I would guess so.
And Kubernetes, scaling in the right way.
Yeah, actually, that was very good.
Which had a whole 3 more views than dangerous demos. So it's a close run thing. But it's interesting to watch the stats to see which ones are popular and which ones aren't.
And the problem I have with that is that if you build Kamailio properly, you don't have to scale it horizontally at all.
Indeed, yeah, it's amazingly scalable.
What you want to apply to this stuff is the media servers you have. Those you need to scale geographically and horizontally and vertically and scale in every direction you have, right? But the Kamailio servers, I don't see that problem. Then you're probably doing the wrong thing in your Kamailios.
Right. And interesting enough, I don't name it, but you can probably guess who the least popular video is. So I say a word?
Is it VUC?
Well, we could reciprocate on this, couldn't we?
VUC panel, by any chance?
No, it wasn't the VUC panel.
Oh, good. I'm glad, because I made a big effort.
The VUC panel had almost 4 times more than the worst one.
Well, I don't think we should talk about the worst.
No. Well, it's not. It wasn't worst at all. It's just
you mean
the least popular.
I would like to get back to Olle about. So, Olle, you started with Asterisk, and you did a lot with Asterisk, including writing a lot of ChanSIP. So
and many other modules as well. I've been into.
Yeah, you are a looming and major figure in all that. And suddenly we see you in Kamailio. By the way, James wants everybody to understand how that's pronounced. It's Kamailio, not Kamailio. Olle, when did you get started with Kamailio?
Kamailio. I'm going to have a big buzzer that goes off with a big red flashing light. So every time somebody says Kamailio, we press the big red button. Well, and by the end of Kamailio World, they will have got it.
Yes, but in the meantime, Olle,
actually, I went back home to Kamailio because I started with SEER.
With SEER, yes.
And was involved in documentation and other stuff with SEER. And then I started with connecting a media server called Asterisk to it. And SEER worked very well, but I'm afraid Asterisk didn't. So I just had to fix Asterisk in order to work with my SEER, because I worked with carriers setting up large-scale infrastructures, and Asterisk wasn't really built for that. It was built for having 2 or 3 SIP phones connecting to Asterisk and then calling out over ISDN or E1s or analog lines.
That's what we did with it in our office when I got excited about Astricon. So I had a really crap little PC that worked with all those 3 cards that I mentioned, and that was our PBX in the office. But I want to ask you.
But that was not how I used Asterisk. During all my work, I actually worked with Asterisk and a SIP proxy, the SEER, OpenSEER, and later Kamailio alongside. But Asterisk was the product that needed attention. And I had a lot of trainings during all that time covering both SEER, OpenSEER, and Asterisk. So I just started to focus more on Kamailio than Asterisk.
Okay, in our new, I was going to go pursue the idea of why you would use Asterisk and Kamailio, but you know what? People can look that up. I want to ask you more about. So you were taking a drama class, or you were involved in drama, and I think that has had an effect on your presentations, right?
No, not drama. Storytelling.
Well, to me,
oral storytelling is very important.
Tell us about storytelling then.
Storytelling is very old tradition. You sit by the campfire and you tell each other stories. You carry stories with you. Everyone has stories. You just need to get them out. And this was really fun for me. I went to a place here in Stockholm in the middle of the old town in the summer with Miriam, my wife. And we sat down with a bunch of other people and we started listening to stories. It's old fairy tales, it's science fiction, it's, contemporary stories from real life or just cool, funny fantasies. But imagine 100 grown-ups sitting outside under a big chestnut tree like kids, listening to stories. And I thought, I want to do that. I can easily go up on stage and show my PowerPoints for 100 people, but in this case, you have no PowerPoints. You have no script. You have your head. And the funny part as you start working with a story is that the story gets its own life. It changes. Like when you do the same presentation 10 times, the presentation the 10th time isn't the same as the first time, because your interaction with the audience makes you change your message a bit. You see where you need to focus. So stories have a life, and it's really, really funny. And it helps me as well to make a difference on stage with my PowerPoints.
One of the things that impressed me a lot, and this goes back, I don't know how many years, Olle, is that you used like vacation photos. You take tons, like everybody, you take tons of photos on vacations, and you used a lot of them as your backgrounds. I know I've told you this 20 times, but I'm telling you in public now that I found that was interesting, that you used original photos, because when people make up slides, let's face it, slides can be really, really, really boring. And if they have only text or too much text, they are. But when you're using an original photo that isn't something that's, like a photo of Seth Godin or something like that, it's your own photo, and then you put a couple of lines of text or a couple of words. When did that come into your head? Because that's a great thing.
I don't know. I've been doing that for quite some time because I'm personally really annoyed with people who put too much text on a slide in a too small font that I can't read because my eyes have a problem. And they start reading from the slide and they look at the slides. I see the back of their heads and the PA system won't be able to cope with that. So it's just boring. And when working with open source, especially most of my time, I promote open standards. You heard me talk about the need for IPv6, the need for TLS, all those issues. So I need to get attention. I need to make a difference compared with those guys that read from slides that are boring. So I guess it started with all of that. When I do training, I have more words on my slides and less pictures, but there are still pictures. But when you do a talk in a conference, you have to stick out. And not all the pictures are from holidays. They're actually from when I'm working abroad or when I'm walking out in the forest by myself, and nowadays with my dog.
I can just imagine you working out in the forest
Right.
with your chainsaw and your check shirt.
Just fantastic. Okay, I just want to mention a couple of things. One is that here is, and I hope this is visible to everybody, ComCon thing, because we're talking to Dan Jenkins on another channel, and he's not able to join us. But we'll be talking about this in the next week or two because I will be there. So I'm all excited now, right? Hello.
Yeah, I have not seen you as excited as this, Randy, in, well, at least a week.
Yeah, because I was so excited at coming. But anyway, all right, stop that. Just want to make sure that we know what Olle is doing, because you do a lot of training. Anything coming up that we need to know about, Olle? Training for
I'm doing
Edvina. Oh, is that
I used to run things, but that market is almost dead. And what's happening is that I do a lot of in-house trainings where I meet a team for a week or two, and I adopt my training. I training material for 2 or 3 weeks on my hard disk drive. So I adopt my training material to what they need, and I bootstrap their project together with them. Then I leave them for half a year, and I come back with my laptop and I start retraining them where they need to be at that point. So that works very well.
Okay, well, I'm sorry we're not going to see you at ComCon. I'm going to go around the table here now and ask final contributions, including you, Olle, so don't hang up immediately. Secret channels. All right, Andy Smith, final contribution. You're on the spot, sir.
What do you want me to contribute about? I won't be going to ComCon. So there we go.
I try to force you.
Yeah, I'm afraid that there are medical reasons why it's not appropriate, so I didn't do it.
Sorry to hear that, Andy. And we're going to move to Corrado because we're going in the order that I see the little vignettes. So, Corrado.
Hello, yes. Sorry, no, I won't be going because I'll be busy. Going back to something that we were talking before, I have now acquired as a client a radio station, local radio station, that I'm CP-fying all of their operations. So
CP-fying, Olle Johansson CP-fying.
You should use the services of Mr. Johansson.
I will, possibly, yes.
All right, James Bodie.
Well, I'm certainly going, and even more than that, I will probably be there to pick up Mr. Randy Resnick from the airport.
I promise I'll get...
And possibly anyone else that needs picking up from the same airport.
So Heathrow.
So if you're going and you're flying into, I think, Heathrow, then my taxi will be awaiting.
What if it's the other airport? Is that worse?
Well, it is. It's more miles. Well, I'll still come and get you though, because you're my buddy, Randy.
All right, because it seems that Air France flies to Heathrow, and Air France is constantly on strike. So I'm looking for somebody else. Keith Milner, you have a chance to say some final thoughts of wisdom. Go ahead.
Well, Well, ComCon, I probably won't be going. Unfortunately, it's a bit too close to my daughter's wedding. No, I'm just looking forward to whatever Olle has next on his schedule in terms of interesting things to talk about, and I look forward to him at Kamailio World next year.
Right. Agreed.
Well said.
And Mr. Michael Graves is with us. I don't know. Michael's on the other side of the Atlantic.
Yeah, I'm not going to ComCon as it happens, but I will take a moment to plug ClueCon, which is at the end of July. I will most definitely be going there, and that's in Chicago.
Excellent.
ClueCon.org or .com.
Unfortunately, I will not be in the States at that point. Mr. Olle Johansson, we asked you before, but anything else before I go to black? Fade to black?
So all of those that are going to ComCon, focus on identities. Focus on assuming that we have a real-time communication network where we can connect each other. How can we work with identities? We need to desperately to replace MD5 authentication and SIP, but we're not going to do that by switching to another checksum algorithm. So we need to figure out what kind of identity structure and authentication structure we need, and spend all your time on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we can start off with smart SIM cards, can't we?
Of course, I expected that from you.
Yeah, well, cheap plug. And hopefully everybody who comes to ComCon will get their own personalized smart SIM card.
Ooh, now I am looking forward to that because I'll be going to the States later. Would that help me there? No.
Well, it might do, actually. Yeah, you could. But you might have to pay some money to make it all work.
Well, I don't mind that. I'm also looking into Google Fi because I have a SIM and may have a phone by then. Anyway, this has been great, and this community gives me an enormous amount of pleasure. And
yeah, because we care and we look after each other and we interact. That's what it's all about.
I agree, and if I die tomorrow, I will have been made that much richer by knowing you all. Thank you, everybody who follows this thing. You know, you have the airlines, right? American Airlines. We know you have a choice of airlines. Well, you have a choice of podcasts, and about 20 of you listen to this one. Thank you so much.
All 20.